I thought my mother-in-law's gift of a family heirloom was a peace offering. I was dead wrong. It was a key to a secret that would shatter my husband's entire world, and the first move in a game of familial chess where the stakes were our very lives. My name is Anna. For 8 years my husband Mark and I have built a fortress of happiness, brick by brick, against the world. Our love was the foundation, our mutual respect the walls, and our shared laughter the roof that kept out even the fiercest storms. We met in graduate school, two ambitious souls surrounded by the heady scent of old books and ambition. I was studying pharmaceutical chemistry, he was on the path to becoming a structural engineer. Our connection was immediate, an electric current of understanding that bypassed the usual awkward dating rituals. We just fit. But every fortress has a weakness, and ours was named Millicent Blackwood, though the world knew her as Mill. Mark's mother. From the moment he brought me to their sprawling, unervingly pristine estate for dinner, I was an outsider. My family was the definition of comfortable middle class. My father taught history with a passion that ignited minds, not bank accounts. My mother was a nurse whose hands held more compassion than Mill's entire bloodline. We valued character, integrity, and the loud, messy joy of a family dinner. The Blackwoods valued lineage, portfolio size, and the silent, cold perfection of a museum. Mill was a master of the subtle assault. "What a charming dress, Anna," she'd say, her eyes scanning my perfectly lovely department store outfit. "It's so refreshing to see a young woman who isn't obsessed with labels." The first time she said it, I smiled, thinking it a compliment. It was Mark who later explained the code. Charming meant cheap. Refreshing meant unsophisticated. He'd squeezed my hand. "Ignore her, Anna. She's from a different century." My father-in-law, Phil, was a study in quiet surrender. A kind man with eyes that held a permanent, gentle sadness, he would often interject with a neutral comment about the weather or the stock market, a futile attempt to deflect Mill's barbs. He'd give me a look, a fleeting, apologetic glance that said, "I see you. I'm sorry. This is just how it is." He was a ghost in his own home, haunting the corridors of a life he never truly controlled. I endured it. For Mark. Because when we drove away from those suffocating gatherings, the weight would lift from his shoulders and he'd become my Mark again. The man who loved bad sci-fi movies and burned toast and me exactly as I was. He was my sanctuary and I was his. The shift began subtly about 18 months ago. Mill, a woman who treated aging as a personal affront, had a health scare. A fainting spell at a charity gala, attributed later to a combination of low blood pressure and the vice-like grip of her corset. But it rattled her. The invincible matriarch showed a crack. The constant stream of criticism slowed to a trickle. She started calling Mark not to complain but to ask about his day. She even called me once to ask for my opinion on a new medication her doctor had prescribed, citing my expertise in pharmaceuticals. I was deeply suspicious, but Mark was buoyant with hope. "See," he said, his face lit with boyish optimism. "I told you she'd come around. She just needed to see how amazing you are." The grand gesture came on my 35th birthday. Mill and Phil arrived for dinner at our much more modest, but infinitely more loved home. Mill carried a small worn velvet box. "Anna," she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. I haven't always been fair to you. This has been in the Blackwood family for generations. My own mother gave it to me when I married Phil. I want you to have it." I opened the box. Inside, nestled on faded silk, was an exquisite antique locket. It was heavy, solid gold, engraved with intricate, swirling Art Nouveau flora. It was the most beautiful piece of jewelry I had ever held. "Mill, this is too much," I stammered, genuinely touched. "Nonsense," she said, patting my hand. Her skin was cool and dry. "Your family now." Mark beamed, his arm around my shoulder, radiating happiness at this perceived truce. But my eyes flicked to Phil. He had gone pale, his knuckles white as he gripped his wine glass. He looked not just surprised but horrified. He quickly masked it with a strange smile and a mumbled, "Yes, it's a beautiful piece. Suits you, Anna." The moment passed, but the memory of his expression lingered like a bad taste. That night after they left, I sat at my vanity, turning the heavy locket over in my hands. It felt like a symbol, a tangible sign that the years of Cold War might be over. I tried to open it to see if there was a picture inside, but the clasp was stubborn, seemingly sealed by time. Curiosity got the better of me. I found a fine sewing needle and with painstaking care, worked at the tiny hinge. After several minutes there was a faint click. The locket sprang open. It was empty. No faded photograph of a stern ancestor, no lock of hair. Just a small hollow space. But tucked inside, almost fused to the back, was a tiny, tightly folded square of paper. My heart hammered against my ribs. This felt like a discovery. Secret. With trembling fingers, I used the needle to gently pry the paper loose. It was brittle with age, the fold lines deep and permanent. I carefully unfolded it. It wasn't a love note. It was a receipt. The header was from the Privat Clinic für Genetische Medizin in Zurich. The date was 32 years ago. The patient name, Millicent Blackwood. But the listed procedure was not for her. It was for Philip Blackwood. And the procedure was described with a clinical coldness that belied its personal nature. Complex andrologische Untersuchung und nachfolgend assistierte Reproduktionstherapie, donor concept, paternaler Zweig. My German was rusty, but it was good enough. Male fertility testing and subsequent assisted reproduction therapy using a donor from the paternal line. The fee was astronomical. Stamped across the bottom was one word: basalt, paid. The room seemed to tilt. Why would Mill give this to me? This wasn't an oversight. The paper was deliberately hidden. This was a message. A bomb wrapped in gold and handed to me with a smile. But what was the target? I woke Mark, who was already half asleep. "Mark, look at this." He squinted at the paper, his brain slowly processing the foreign words. "What is it?" "A receipt. It's from a clinic in Switzerland. For your dad. For the fertility treatment. A donor." Mark's face hardened instantly. The sleepiness vanished, replaced by a defensive anger I knew was reserved for one topic: his mother. "This is it, Anna. This is her game. She gives you this precious heirloom knowing you're curious, knowing you'll find this. She's planting a seed. She can't stand that we're happy, that we're independent, so she's trying to create a problem where there isn't one." He snatched the paper from my hand. "It's ancient history. It has nothing to do with us." "But Mark, don't you see? This is huge. What does this mean for you? For your identity?" "It means nothing," he snapped, his voice rising. "My father is Phil Blackwood. The man who raised me. That's all that matters. This is just a piece of paper from a time they were struggling. She's using it to get under our skin. Throw it away." He crumpled the receipt and tossed it toward the wastebasket, turning his back to me. The conversation was over. But I couldn't let it go. As I lay awake next to his rigid form, I knew with a chilling certainty that this was more than a mind game. Mill was a strategist. This was a calculated move, and I needed to understand the battlefield. In the days that followed, I became a secret archaeologist of my own family's history. I started observing Phil with new eyes. Mark had always been told he took after Mill's side of the family, the strong, dramatic features. But now the differences between Mark and Phil seemed stark. Phil was tall, slender, with a gentle slope to his shoulders and fine, light hair. Mark was compact, powerful, with a stubborn jawline and a head of thick, dark, unruly curls. Things I'd never thought twice about. A particular way Mark laughed, a gesture he made when thinking, now seemed like clues to a puzzle I was terrified to solve. I began my research. Dr. Friedrich Haas, the name on the receipt, was untraceable, likely retired or deceased. The clinic had closed in the late 90s. I hit wall after wall. Desperate, I turned to the one person who might have answers, but who I was most afraid to approach. Phil. I waited for a day Mark was presenting at a conference out of state. I called Phil, my voice shaking only slightly. Phil, the faucet in the guest bathroom is leaking again. I know you fixed it last time, but I'm hopeless. Could you possibly take a look? He arrived an hour later, his tool bag in hand. He fixed the faucet with quiet efficiency as he always did. Afterward, I poured us both a cup of coffee and we sat at the kitchen table. The autumn sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I took a deep breath, placed the smoothed-out receipt on the table between us and set the locket on top of it. The effect was instantaneous. All the color drained from Phil's face. He looked old, frail, and utterly terrified. His hands trembled so violently he had to set his coffee mug down. "Phil," I said, my voice soft but firm. "Mill gave this to me. She wanted me to find this. I need to know what it means. For Mark's sake. For all our sakes." For a long moment he just stared at the paper as if it were a venomous snake. Then a single tear escaped and traced a path through the stubble on his cheek. The dam broke. The story he told me was more heartbreaking than I could have imagined. Their early marriage was a pressure cooker of expectation. Mill, the only daughter of a powerful industrialist, was expected to produce an heir. But after 2 years of trying, nothing happened. Tests revealed the problem was with Phil, a rare genetic condition that made conception virtually impossible. For Mill, it was a personal failure, a public humiliation she could not bear. Adoption was beneath her. She needed a biological heir, a continuation of her bloodline. She found this clinic in Switzerland, Phil whispered, his voice raw. They offered a solution. A very confidential one. IVF, but with a donor from my family. To maintain the paternal line, at least in appearance. He took a shaky breath. The donor was my younger brother, Robert. I remembered Robert from old photo albums. A vibrant, handsome man who seemed to radiate energy even from faded photographs. He had died in a car accident when Mark was a teenager. I'd only met him a handful of times. Robert was everything I wasn't, Phil continued, his eyes distant. Strong, charismatic, fearless. He agreed to do it for us. For me. It was the most painful secret of my life. After the procedure was successful, Robert couldn't handle it. He moved to Australia shortly after Mark was born. We barely spoke again. It was a ghost between us until the day he died. The pieces were falling into a horrifying picture. But why now, Phil? Why would Mill give this to me now? Phil looked down at his hands. Robert passed away 6 months ago. Pancreatic cancer. It was quick. Mill was named in his will. He left her a significant sum of money, a final twisted joke, I think. He's been different since. Angrier, more volatile. I think this is her way of punishing me. For not being enough. For being the reason she had to resort to this. By giving this to you, she's showing me that she holds the power to destroy the only good thing that came out of our farce of a marriage. My relationship with my son. She can tear it all down whenever she chooses. The pity I felt for this man was overwhelming. He had lived 3 decades in a gilded cage, his love for his son tethered to a devastating lie. But my overwhelming emotion was fear for Mark. He had a right to know. He had a right to know about Robert, about his true biological father, about the uncle who had sacrificed so much. The confrontation with Mark that evening was the most brutal of our marriage. When I told him what I had learned, his reaction was volcanic. He didn't just dismiss it, he attacked me. "You went behind my back?" he roared, his face contorted in a rage I had never seen directed at me. "You ambushed my father? My God, Anna, she's won. She's gotten exactly what she wanted. You're doing her dirty work for her." "Mark, please listen to me." Phil confirmed everything. He showed me pictures, letters. "I don't care," he shouted. "My father is Phil Blackwood. The man who taught me how to ride a bike, who sat up with me when I was sick. Not some ghost from a receipt. It's not about replacing him. It's about the truth. Your mother is going to use this against us, I know she is. The only person causing problems right now is you, he yelled back. I told you to drop it. Why couldn't you just drop it? The words felt like physical blows. He packed a bag, his movements sharp and angry. I can't be here right now. I can't look at you when you've let her poison everything. The door slammed shut and the silence that followed was deafening. I crumpled to the floor, sobbing. For 3 agonizing days we had no contact. I was lost, adrift in a sea of betrayal and heartache. Mill, sensing the schism, called me. Her voice was no longer sweet. It was cold, sharp, and triumphant. I see you've been digging, Anna, she purred. A smart girl. I knew you would be. It's important for a wife to know what kind of man she's married to. And what kind of weak bloodline she's marrying into. You are a monster, I spat into the phone, my tears drying into a hard knot of anger. You would destroy your own son to get back at your husband? My son, she laughed, a sound like breaking glass. We'll see about that. A son should know his true parentage, don't you think? Especially before he makes any more permanent decisions. It was a direct threat. She was going to tell him. And she would do it in the most damaging way possible. I couldn't let that happen. Called Phil. He sounded broken but resolute. Together we went to the boutique hotel where Mark was staying. The meeting in the sterile hotel room was a symphony of pain. Phil, weeping openly, confirmed every word. He didn't just tell the story, he showed the evidence. A faded photograph of Robert at 25. It was like looking at Mark's doppelganger. The resemblance was terrifying. Letters from Robert, talking about the arrangement and his hope for a good life for the child. The official obituary from an Australian newspaper. Mark didn't speak. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the photograph of Robert. The anger on his face melted away, replaced by a profound, hollowed-out grief. He wasn't just learning a secret. His entire history was being rewritten before his eyes. He was mourning the loss of a father he never knew, and grappling with the identity of the father he did know. He asked us to leave. For a week he disappeared. He didn't answer calls or texts. I was sick with worry. Finally, one evening I heard his key in the lock. He looked exhausted, thinner, but his eyes held a new, sober clarity. He walked straight to me and wrapped his arms around me, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. I'm so sorry, Anna, he whispered into my hair, his voice thick with emotion. You were trying to protect me. I was so busy defending the family I thought I had. I couldn't see the enemy was already inside the gates. We talked for hours. He had driven to the coast, walked for miles along the beach, and finally allowed himself to grieve. He realized that Phil's courage in revealing the truth was a greater act of fatherhood than any biological link. He decided that Phil would always be his dad. But he also felt a poignant connection to Robert, a man he wished he could have known. We made a pact. We would cut Mill out of our lives, completely and permanently. Her actions were unforgivable. We changed our numbers, blocked her on all platforms. Phil, empowered by our solidarity, moved out of the family home and into a small apartment. The fortress walls were going back up and she was on the outside. But Mill was a master strategist who hated to lose. Enraged that her plan had backfired, that Phil had not only sided with us but left her, she planned her counterattack. She organized a massive 25th anniversary party at the most exclusive country club in the state. It was a command performance. She knew we wouldn't want to come, but she banked on social obligation and a lifetime of guilt-tripping to force Phil's hand. She sent invitations to everyone, ensuring the pressure was immense. Phil, however, was a new man. The shackles were off. I'll go, he told us, his jaw set. But I'm not going to pretend. I'm going to end this once and for all. But I need you two there with me. Mark and I exchanged a look. The idea of facing that viper's nest was abhorrent. But we saw the strength in Phil's eyes. We couldn't let him face it alone. We agreed. The ballroom was a glittering spectacle of old money and false bonhomie. Mill held court, resplendent in a crimson gown, playing the part of the celebrated matriarch to perfection. She glided over to us, her smile a razor blade. "Philip. Mark. So glad you could make it." Her eyes swept over me with pure, undiluted hatred before she moved on. After dinner she took the microphone. The room fell into a respectful hush. She spoke of 25 years of love and partnership, her voice dripping with saccharine sentiment. Then her tone shifted. Her gaze swept the room and landed squarely on me. "But families," she sighed dramatically, "are complicated. They are built on secrets. And sometimes a mother's duty is to protect her child, even from the most painful truths, even when those truths come from within the family itself." My blood turned to ice. She was going to do it. This was her stage. She was going to reveal Mark's paternity to the entire world of Blackwood society. "Some of you may not know," she continued, her voice trembling with faux emotion, "that the foundation of this family has a crack. That my son Mark has been living a life built on a lie. His very identity." Phil stood up. He didn't rush. He walked calmly, purposefully to the podium. The crowd watched, mesmerized. He gently but firmly took the microphone from Mill's startled hand. She looked at him, her eyes wide with shock and dawning fury. "My wife is correct," Phil said, his voice amplified, clear and steady. It was a voice I barely recognized. A voice of authority. "We have been living a lie. For 25 years. The lie was not about biology. The lie was that this marriage was a partnership built on love and mutual respect." He turned to face the stunned audience, ignoring Mill's hissed, "Philip, sit down." "The truth is," he continued, "it was built on my fear and her manipulation. I stayed for one reason and one reason only, my son. But I will not stand by for another moment and allow her to poison his life, or the life of his brilliant, kind, and courageous wife any longer. So tonight, in front of all of you who we have called friends, I am ending the lie." He looked directly at Mill, whose face was a mask of purple rage. "Millicent, our marriage is over." He placed the microphone on the podium. The silence in the room was absolute, a vacuum of sound. Then a wave of gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Phil turned, walked down from the podium and straight toward the exit. Mark and I stood up immediately and followed him. We didn't look back. The three of us walked out of that gilded cage together, into the cool, liberating night air. The fallout was seismic. The society pages had a field day. Mill, exposed and humiliated, retreated from public life. The divorce, thanks to the ironclad prenup she had insisted upon to protect her own family's money, was swift. She received what was legally hers, but no alimony and no claim to the assets Phil had brought into the marriage. Mark embarked on a journey of discovery. He reached out to Robert's former partner in Australia, discovering he had a half-sister he never knew about. He learned about the man Robert had been. A wildlife conservationist, a man who loved life fiercely. It didn't change who Mark was, but it added a new, rich layer to his understanding of himself. Phil blossomed. He traveled, took up painting, and started dating a lovely, down-to-earth librarian who made him laugh. He was finally living his own life. As for Mill, we heard through the grapevine that she sold the estate and moved to a condo in a city where no one knew her. Her attempts to smear us fell on deaf ears. She had played her final, most destructive card, and she had lost everything. One evening, months later, the three of us, Mark, Phil, and I, were in our backyard. Phil was grilling, arguing amiably with Mark about the proper way to cook a steak. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. I was setting the table, a contented smile on my face. Mark came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and nuzzling my neck. "You know," he said softly, "that locket was the best and worst gift she ever gave us." I leaned back into him. "It was the key," I replied. "Yeah," he said, kissing my temple. "It was the key that unlocked the door to the truth. And we walked right through it together." The storm had passed. Our fortress was stronger than ever, not in spite of the battles we had fought but because of them. We were free.